Let me take you on a trip back to the tail end of the 19th century. This was a time when cars were simply an idea, a dream that was close to becoming a reality, something aspirational that by the very end of the 1800s was starting to look like a viable alternative to horses and carriages. Owners of said horses and carriages ran into a problem when they discovered that their carriages didn't have enough power to move on their own accord when the horses had to go potty or have lunch. This led them to an interesting solution, creating the first ever hybrid combustion and electric prototypes, the first one of which was constructed by Ferdinand Porsche in 1903. Yes, that Ferdinand Porsche. Others tried some different takes on the formula, but it didn't really take off. Hybrids remained a pipe dream well into the 20th century, by which point more and more cars began appearing on the road. Many years passed, and in those years there was an oil crisis, and there was an influx of efficient cars from Asia to markets all over the world. Eventually, the United States government created the Partnership for a New Generation of Vehicles. This program, which came into force in 1993, gave automakers the opportunity to collaborate with institutions that would help them squeeze the most efficiency out of their cars.
Is it so far-fetched to believe you may someday drive a car that doesn't use gasoline? A car whose only emission is pure, clean water? It's not fantasy. Such a vehicle is right around the corner. As a matter of fact, in the not-so-distant future, automobiles may no longer have any impact on the environment. The car you're looking at is a step on the road to that reality. It's called the Precept.
The goal was to construct their first working prototypes by 2004, but none of the American automakers were quick enough to make this happen. Meanwhile, over in Japan, things were a little different. During the 1995 Tokyo Motor Show, Toyota debuted something they called the G21 concept. It was a funky-looking small car, not dissimilar to Toyota's Echo that they started offering a few years after that. The idea behind the G21 was pretty significant. The name was actually an abbreviation for a global car for the 21st century, and it was the proof of concept that Toyota finally found a hybrid system that would actually be functional and fit into a regular passenger car. They showed off their proof of concept at the 1995 Tokyo Motor Show, as I said, to some significant fanfare. Meanwhile, they also had running prototypes behind the scenes. Eventually, the production car ended up using the TRW Helt hybrid solution, which means pairing up two electric motors to each of the front wheels through a planetary gear set. Do I know what that means? Of course not, but it sounds cool. As you can see here, one of these prototypes closely resembles the final production car. I kinda like it. It has a Pixar film car vibe to it, and the wheels bear more than a passing resemblance to the Mark IV Supra's wheels. Toyota ramped up the speed on the production of their little hybrid car that could, which resulted in the car hitting the Japanese market officially in 1997, bearing a name that would soon become synonymous with hybrid automobiles. Prius. Prius is a Latin word meaning previous or prior. That might sound a little strange, but it's generally agreed that the reason behind the name is simply that there was no car quite like the Prius before, although technically that isn't really true. When it launched in 1997, it cost the equivalent of around $18,000 in Japan, which wasn't bad for such an advanced car. The fuel consumption was rated at around 6.7 liters per 100 kilometers of driving. That may seem like no big deal today. In fact, that's about the Kormobile's average around town, but for 1997, this was huge. It took a while for the Prius to reach overseas markets, eventually arriving in the United States and Europe and other foreign markets in the year 2000. It was a little different compared to the Japanese version, with a slightly more powerful hybrid setup, a small rear spoiler, and smaller wheels. When the Prius first hit the market, most people thought that Toyota would be making a loss on it and that it would be a niche product that would only sell in limited numbers. Their perspective somewhat made sense, as that's pretty much what was happening with the car that beat the Prius to market by a few months in overseas markets, the Honda Insight. While consumers didn't really make much of the first generation Prius, by 2003 this car went on to destroy every forecast that was made about its success.
Here comes Motor Trend's 2004 Car of the Year. The new Prius with hybrid synergy drive.
2003 brought along the second generation Prius, which featured a much more attractive exterior, improvements in aerodynamics and efficiency, and an extended battery warranty. Fun fact, the term mild hybrid was dreamt up by Toyota around this time, so we have them to thank for that designation on cars today. Anyway, the second generation Prius was still the same type of vehicle at its core. A small, efficient family car that didn't really have any groundbreaking features, setting aside the hybrid powertrain. But then, something that not even the most well-versed marketing and sales executives at Toyota could have predicted happened. During the 2000s, the Prius became a must-have item for Hollywood pop culture icons. Because of the Prius' status as an ultra-efficient car and its lower emissions immediately tie it with saving the planet and the environment, A-list Hollywood celebrities were one of the most well-known adopters of the Prius. Natalie Portman, Jennifer Aniston, Leo DiCaprio, Miley Cyrus, Emily Blunt, Tom Hanks, who also auctioned off his car to charity. This is just a small handful of celebrities who have owned a Prius at some point. Oh, I almost forgot, Brian Griffin of Family Guy also drives a Prius. I would be lying to you if I knew whether this was the actual reason why the Prius brand took off into stardom, but if you ask me, it's definitely one of the contributing factors, as a lot of us tend to copy the things that people we idolize do, and we also have a tendency to listen to our idols when they tell us to do something. The Prius brand had successfully taken off, and Toyota had successfully shown the world that hybrid production cars are indeed possible. At which point other automakers started trialing their own hybrid cars, eventually making them a part of their regular lineup. However, as well as the love that the Prius received from Hollywood celebrities, the Prius also garnered a slightly different reputation, and unfortunately, this became the predominant one.
Trading forces way in there, look at that.
Ever since the Prius first arrived on the market, society crafted a stereotype that we simply refer to as Prius drivers. Prius drivers generally don't exactly display the utmost of driving skill, or to put it in a slightly less charitable way, they are absolute drivers. I should of course point out that I don't think personally that every single Prius driver is a bad driver, I'm just explaining the stereotype. There are countless examples all over the internet of Prius drivers committing driving offenses and generally just not being very bright. They were the 2000s equivalent of Mustang and Altima drivers today. Then the Prius also became synonymous with environmentally conscious people, or as people prefer to call them in a more derogatory way, hippies or tree huggers. I still remember back in 2015 I was a member of a Facebook group called Everyone there was very civil and nice to all the contributors and their opinions. But then when I posted my opinion that the previous generation Prius, this one, was not a bad looking car, I was immediately told off, to which I promptly responded by leaving the group. By 2010, Toyota introduced the third generation Prius, which brought improved styling and further improved aerodynamics, as well as some exciting new tech features. Adaptive cruise control, a heads-up display, and a navigation system, just to name a few. The 2010s was also the time when Toyota decided to spin off the Prius into its own separate sub-lineup, if you will. It began with the Prius V in 2011, also known as the Prius Alpha in Japan and the Prius Plus in Europe. As the V, and indeed the exterior of the car implies, this is literally a Prius minivan, 3-row seating and all. Swiss cab drivers can't get enough of these things, as I discovered on my 2 trips there. There was also the Prius C, which shoehorned the Prius powertrain into a much smaller compact car package. In 2014, we got the 4th generation Prius, which brought a pretty radical change to the exterior styling, though perhaps not as radical as the latest car that was just recently announced. Throughout the 2010s, the Prius driver stereotype was expanded to include Uber drivers. We all know that the vehicle of choice for most Uber drivers is the Prius, and we also know that some Uber drivers don't really know their limits. Anyway, the latest Prius is a hot topic right now, and with good reason. First of all, it looks absolutely stunning if you ask me. Actually, if you ask just about anyone who's seen it. It's a very captivating design that seems to strike a perfect balance between aerodynamics and beauty. It's also the most powerful Prius ever, with the regular hybrid getting 196 horsepower and the plug-in hybrid getting 221. Although Toyota expanding their hybrid offering to basically every single model in their lineup globally cannibalized the sales of the Prius, by introducing this fresh new design, better dynamics, and in the case of most overseas markets only offering it as a plug-in hybrid, they are proving that they're not ready to let it die just yet. When you think about it, it wouldn't be a good idea for them to abandon it, as the Prius launched a total revolution in the automotive industry and it proved to the world that hybrid powertrains in cars are 100% viable and they actually do a good job of reducing emissions and saving you gas money. Looking past all the stigma surrounding the Prius and all the negative things that it stands for in the eyes of the public, and especially in the eyes of car enthusiasts, it's tough to argue with the fact that it was a complete revolution. So that's gonna be about it for this video, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. There will be links in the description, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.